I can see my hands shaking as I'm writing this, and I still don't know if I'm ready to tell the whole truth about what happened at my mother-in-law's 60th anniversary dinner last month. Some things, once you say them out loud, become real in a way you can't take back. But I think I need to. Because what happened that night destroyed everything I thought I had, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to rebuild from the ashes. My name is Ashley, and my husband threw me out in front of 200 people while his mother watched from her seat of honor and smiled. Let me back up, though, because you need to understand the before to understand why the after feels like living in someone else's nightmare. 3 years ago, I married Michael Chen in a small ceremony at the Riverside Country Club outside Denver. It wasn't the wedding I dreamed about as a kid. No elaborate church, no $500 dress, nothing like that. Michael had just made partner at his consulting firm, and we were on a tight timeline because his mother, Linda, had decided she wanted a grandchild by her 60th birthday. So we got married on a Saturday in April, and by the time her birthday rolled around last month, we'd been trying unsuccessfully for 2 years. That detail matters, I think. That's where this story really starts. Michael's family is old money. Not that they flaunt it, not exactly. But Linda's father made his fortune in commercial real estate, and the family owns half of downtown Denver. The house where we lived, in Cherry Creek, was technically ours, but the down payment came from Linda's gift. The vacation home in Aspen, where we spent Thanksgiving, was another gift. Michael's salary was good, around $220,000 a year, but compared to the family's actual wealth, we were middle class pretending to be something more. I just didn't realize how much that mattered until everything fell apart. Before the dinner, life felt normal, blessed even. Michael was attentive in the way that matters. He remembered my coffee order. He texted during the day. He held my hand in the car. We had a beautiful house with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the South Platte River. My job as a marketing manager at a tech startup paid well enough that I didn't feel dependent on him, though we shared our paychecks into a joint account. We talked about expanding our family, and our fertility specialist had suggested we try one more round of IVF in the fall. Michael had seemed on board. He'd even suggested we celebrate his mom's birthday early, take a long weekend to Cabo, just the two of us. Everything felt stable. The anniversary dinner was supposed to be the event of the season. Linda had rented the entire top floor of the Ritz-Carlton downtown, 300 people, catered by Denver's most exclusive restaurant, a string quartet, an ice sculpture of a swan. Linda had spent probably $30,000, maybe more. She'd invited everyone who mattered: city council members, country club friends, Michael's cousins and their families, colleagues from his firm. I spent 4 hours getting ready that evening. I wore a champagne-colored Stella McCartney gown that I'd bought on sale for almost $2,000, a splurge I justified because Michael's mom had made a comment about my typical shopping mall taste at Thanksgiving the year before. When we arrived at the hotel, Michael was already on his third drink. I noticed it immediately because Michael never drinks heavily. He's careful about his appearance, his health, his reputation. But that night, he seemed anxious. His jaw was tight. He kept checking his phone and putting it back in his pocket. I asked him if everything was okay, and he said it was just a work thing, client issue, nothing to worry about. I believed him because I had no reason not to. We mingled for a while. I talked to his cousin Jennifer about her kids' school situation. I listened to his Uncle David tell the same story about a golf tournament I'd heard at least 4 times. I smiled and held Michael's arm and felt, for the first time in a while, like I actually belonged in this world. Linda looked beautiful in a floor-length emerald gown, and she kept holding court near the ice sculpture, accepting congratulations and hugs. Michael had gone to the bar again. That's when things started to feel wrong. His business partner, Brandon, pulled Michael aside near the bathroom hallway. I was getting a drink myself when I saw them. Brandon looked serious, urgent even. He was saying something low and intense. Michael's face went pale. Actually pale, like someone had drained all the blood from his head. Brandon put a hand on his shoulder, and Michael shook it off. Then he turned and looked directly at me across the ballroom, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. It was the look of someone who'd just been caught. I didn't know it yet, but my entire life was about to change in the next 15 minutes. The person I'd married, the future I thought we were building together, the person I believed I was, all of it was about to evaporate like it had never existed at all, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I felt Michael's hand on my elbow, firm and cold. He was steering me toward the hallway, away from the ballroom, away from the string quartet and the ice sculpture and his mother's radiant smile. My champagne glass was still in my hand. I remember that detail because I kept gripping it tighter, like if I held on hard enough, the night would make sense again. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was flat, stripped of everything that usually made it warm. "Michael, what's going on? You're scaring me." I tried to keep my voice light, playful even, but my heart was already running. There was something in his face I'd never seen before, something closed off and angry and afraid all at once. He pulled me into a service corridor, the kind hotel staff use. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner. It was surreal, like stepping out of a party and into a storage closet. My dress, the one I'd agonized over for weeks, suddenly felt ridiculous in this space. "Brandon just told me something," Michael said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at a point past my shoulder, at nothing. "About you." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. "About me? What are you talking about?" He saw something. On Instagram. A photo you were tagged in 3 weeks ago at that hotel in Boulder. The Meadowbrook Inn. I went cold. Not confused, cold. Because I knew immediately what he was talking about. There was only one reason to mention the Meadowbrook Inn in that tone of voice. "Michael." "With my father." The words hung there between us like a physical thing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't form a sentence. My mind was splitting into two versions of reality. The one where this conversation wasn't happening, and the one where everything I'd built was collapsing in real time. "It's not what you think," I started. But what a stupid thing to say. What could it possibly be except exactly what he thought? "Don't," he held up a hand. "Just don't." Brandon showed me the photo. "You're at a restaurant table. My father has his hand on your arm. You're laughing." His voice cracked on that last word. "My wife is laughing with my father at a hotel in Boulder, and I'm finding out about it from my business partner at my mother's birthday party. We were just..." I couldn't even finish. What could I say? We were just what? Having lunch? That was the truth, but it sounded hollow even in my own head. "How long?" Michael asked. "It was nothing. It was one lunch. He called me out of the blue and..." "How long, Ashley?" I closed my eyes. "Since February." Michael made a sound like something breaking inside him. He turned away from me, pressed his palms against the beige wall like he was trying to push through it. "He's my father," Michael whispered. "And you're my wife. And you've been meeting him in secret. At hotels." "Not hotels. Just that one time. We went to lunch because he wanted to talk to me about something, and he didn't want it getting back to you yet, and..." I was spiraling, saying too much, explaining away something that couldn't be explained away. "About what?" I didn't answer. That was my mistake. That silence told him everything he needed to know. Michael turned back to face me, and his eyes were dead. I'd never seen someone look at me like that, like I was a stranger, like I was something he'd stepped in on the street. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "Michael, please. We can talk about this. We can..." "No, we can't. You lied to me. You met my father in secret, and you're standing here, in that dress, at my mother's party, and you've been lying to my face for months." He pulled out his phone and opened up the photo. It was there. Me and his father Robert at the Meadowbrook Inn, my head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. I looked happy. I looked like I had something to hide. I'd been so stupid, so impossibly stupid. "I want you to go home, pack a bag, and then I want you to leave. We're done, Ashley. I don't know how long you've been with him, but I don't care anymore. You've made your choice." I haven't been with him. Michael, his business was in trouble, and he wanted advice on restructuring, and he didn't want anyone to know because he was embarrassed. "Stop talking." Michael's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Just stop. Go home. Pack. Leave. I'll have my attorney contact you tomorrow." My attorney. Those words. That's when it became real. The party was still happening just beyond those beige walls. 200 people were eating catered food and drinking expensive wine and listening to a string quartet. Michael's mother was still accepting congratulations. And Michael was ending my marriage in a service corridor under fluorescent lights because I'd kept a secret I thought was keeping the peace. "I'm going back in there," Michael said. "And if anyone asks, you got sick. Food poisoning. That's the story. You're going home." He walked past me back toward the ballroom. I stood alone in that fluorescent corridor, my champagne glass still in my hand, and I realized I had no choice but to obey. Because if I didn't, if I went back out there and made a scene, or tried to explain, or did anything except disappear quietly, everything would get worse. Much worse. I set my glass down on a service table with shaking hands. I took off my Stella McCartney heels because I couldn't drive in them, and I walked out of the Ritz-Carlton in my bare feet, my dress dragging on the concrete, and I drove home alone, in the car Michael had bought me with money from the house Linda had gifted us. By the time I got to Cherry Creek, I was hyperventilating. I couldn't get a full breath. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. The house was dark and cold, and it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage set for a life that had just been canceled. I sat on the marble floor of our entryway in my champagne gown with my bare feet, and I realized something that should have terrified me more than it did. I had no one to call. Michael had isolated me so thoroughly from his family that calling them was unthinkable. My own parents lived in Arizona and were not equipped to understand this. My best friend Sarah was in Denver, but what would I even say? The thing I didn't know yet, the thing that would destroy me, was that Michael hadn't just left the party, he'd stayed. And while I was packing a bag with shaking hands, he was telling his mother exactly what I'd done. He was telling her about the secret lunches. He was showing her the photo. And Linda, who had always looked at me with that cool, assessing gaze, was finally getting the validation she'd always wanted. Proof that I didn't belong in their family at all. By midnight, my phone was blowing up with texts. Not from Michael, from people I'd considered friends at the country club. People asking if it was true. People saying they'd always wondered about me. People sending me links to the photo, which Brandon had apparently shared in a group chat with half of Denver's professional elite. I didn't even know about the restraining order yet. That was coming. But as I sat in our beautiful house, surrounded by our beautiful things, I understood that none of it was really mine. None of it had ever been mine. And Michael, it wasn't even the realization that I'd been set up, that Robert had reached out to me deliberately to create exactly this situation. It was understanding, as I read through those texts, that I'd made one critical mistake 3 weeks ago. I'd trusted the wrong person, and now the entire city knew I was a liar. By 1 a.m, my phone rang. It was my lawyer, or rather, someone calling on behalf of Michael's lawyer. They were serving me papers. I had until Monday to retain my own counsel, and I needed to vacate the house within 7 days. I hung up and sat in the dark living room, and I let myself fall apart completely. The next 72 hours exist in my memory as a series of disconnected moments. A call to Sarah, who picked up immediately and said, "I'm coming over," without asking why. The moment Sarah walked through the door and saw me in yesterday's makeup, still in the champagne dress, and just held me without saying anything. The phone call to my parents where I tried to explain and couldn't, where my mother kept saying, "But I thought you were happy," and I didn't have an answer. I couldn't afford a lawyer, not immediately. Michael had already frozen our joint account. He'd done it Sunday morning, which meant he'd planned this, or at least he'd been ready for it. My paycheck was direct deposit, but it wasn't enough, not compared to what I'd need to fight someone with access to unlimited family money. I called my credit card company and found out that Michael had removed me as an authorized user on the American Express. He'd done it remotely, probably Saturday night after coming home from the party, so I was locked out of that too. Sarah drove me to her apartment in Lodo on Sunday. She didn't ask me to explain beyond the bare facts. She just let me sit in her guest room and stare at the wall. She brought me food I couldn't eat. She took my phone away at night because I kept checking it for messages from Michael that weren't coming. It wasn't until Tuesday that I got the formal letter from Michael's attorney. They were asking for the house back, of course. They were asking for the Aspen property. They were asking for a division of assets that would leave me with basically nothing: my car, my clothes, my 401k. Michael's lawyers had somehow found documentation that proved the Cherry Creek house had always been intended as a gift to Michael, not to both of us. Linda had apparently kept meticulous records. I was being erased. But here's the thing about hitting absolute bottom. You finally stop trying to figure out how to stay afloat. You stop apologizing. You stop trying to make sense of it. You just start thinking about survival. On Wednesday morning, I was sitting in Sarah's kitchen with terrible coffee and my laptop, and I was scrolling through everything I could find about Robert Chen online, Michael's father, the man who'd apparently orchestrated this entire thing, though I still didn't fully understand why. That's when I found it. There was a lawsuit from 2015. A woman named Jennifer Park had sued Robert Chen for sexual harassment and coercion at his real estate firm. The case had been settled confidentially, which usually means money changed hands and everyone agreed to shut up. But Jennifer Park's name was still there in the court records, public information, and I had her number from a quick LinkedIn search. I stared at that number for probably 10 minutes. Then I called it. Jennifer picked up on the third ring, and when I said my name, she went very quiet. "Ashley Chen?" she said finally. "Michael's wife?" "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I said, and then I told her everything. The lunch, the photo, the way Michael had used it to blow up my entire life, the way his father had set me up. When I finished, Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "He did the same thing to me," she said. "Different methods, but the same goal. He got me alone, got me to trust him, got me to do something that looked compromising in a photo, and then he used it to control me, to keep me quiet about what he'd actually done." My hands were shaking. "What did he do to you?" "I'll tell you," Jennifer said, "but first I need to know something. Do you want to fight back? Because if you do, I have something that might help you, something I've been holding on to for 8 years, waiting for the right moment." I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with her eyes wide. I looked at my phone, at the legal papers scattered across the kitchen table. I looked at the life I'd built being dismantled, piece by piece, by people who'd decided I was disposable. "Yes," I said. "I want to fight back." "Then we need to talk about a recording," Jennifer said, "and about why Robert Chen has been running the exact same con for almost a decade." Jennifer's voice on the phone was steady, but I could hear something underneath it, years of anger, carefully stored and waiting for exactly this moment. "The recording is from 2014, she said. "Robert called me into his office late one evening. He said he wanted to discuss a promotion, but what he actually wanted was for me to take the blame for some financial discrepancies in the firm, real discrepancies that he'd created. He was going to fire me, destroy my reputation, unless I agreed to his terms." "What terms?" I asked. My mouth was dry. "That I'd keep quiet about a very specific transaction. Money he'd moved around, property deals that weren't quite legal. He needed someone expendable to take the fall if anyone looked too closely. He chose me because I was young, because I didn't have powerful family connections, because he knew I wouldn't fight back." Sarah was watching me from across the kitchen table. She'd pulled up a chair and was listening to Jennifer through the speakerphone. "But I recorded it," Jennifer continued. "I had my phone in my purse. I didn't plan it. I just thought, someday I might need proof. And I was right. The recording is clear. Robert, in his own words, explaining his scheme, explaining why he needed to destroy me, and explaining that this was a pattern he'd used before." My hands were shaking. "He says it on the recording? That he's done this before?" "He does. He's proud of it, actually. He talks about 3 other people, names and everything. Tells me I should be grateful he's only asking me to take the fall for one thing instead of multiple things like the others. Ashley, it's a confession, a complete confession of organized fraud and coercion." I looked at Sarah. She was pale. "Why didn't you use it?" I asked. "Why didn't you take him down in 2014? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "Because I was terrified. Because he was already threatening to sue me for defamation if I told anyone. Because his family is rich and powerful, and I knew I couldn't afford to fight them. Because by the time I understood what had happened, he'd already started the process of isolating me from everyone in the company. People didn't believe me. They believed him. He was charming, and I was just the girl who'd made mistakes at work." "But you kept the recording," I said. "I did, and I told myself that someday, when I was strong enough, I'd use it, when I had nothing left to lose. And then you called me, and I realized this was it. This was the moment. Because he's still doing it. He's still hunting for women he can manipulate. He's still using his son as cover." That last part hit me like a physical blow. "Michael knew," I said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know for certain," Jennifer said carefully, "but I think so. I think Robert probably told Michael that he was teaching him something important about control, about power, about how to handle women who step out of line. I think Michael learned from his father exactly how to destroy you." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "What do you need from me?" Jennifer asked. "If we're going to do this, we need to be strategic. The recording alone won't be enough in a divorce case. But if we can get you to file a police report, if we can get other women to come forward, if we can prove that Robert was running an organized scheme of coercion and fraud, that changes everything. It becomes a criminal matter. It stops being about your marriage and starts being about crime." "I'll do it," I said. "Whatever you need, tell me what to do." Over the next 3 days, Jennifer and I talked for hours. She connected me with a different lawyer, not the expensive Denver firm that Michael had hired, but a woman named Carol who specialized in cases involving financial crimes and coercion. Carol listened to Jennifer's recording. Carol read through all my documentation about the freezing of accounts, the removal of me from credit cards, the way Michael had orchestrated everything. "This is good," Carol said. "This is really good. But we need to move fast. Once Michael realizes you're not going to roll over, he's going to accelerate everything. He's going to try to liquidate assets, hide money, disappear if he can." By Friday, Carol had filed a police report on my behalf. She'd included Jennifer's recording. She'd included documentation of Robert's pattern of behavior. She'd included the Instagram photo and Michael's explicit threat to throw me out. By Saturday morning, there was a detective at my apartment. Sarah had gone to her office, and I was sitting alone when he knocked. His name was Detective Torres, and he was very clear about what he wanted. "I need you to document everything," he said. "Every conversation you remember having with Michael Chen, every text, every email. I'm going to need you to sit down with a sketch artist and describe what you saw that night at the hotel. I need names of people who witnessed the confrontation between you and your husband. And I need you to think very carefully about whether Robert Chen ever made any explicit threats to you." "He didn't," I said. "He was always very careful, very charming. He'd call me and ask how I was doing, ask about Michael, ask if we were planning to have children. He made me feel special, like he was the only person in the family who truly cared about my happiness." "That's classic grooming behavior," Torres said. "He was building trust, setting you up to be vulnerable when he made his move." Over the next 2 weeks, I gave statement after statement. Jennifer connected me with 2 other women, one from Robert's firm in 2011, one from a real estate conference in 2012. Both had experienced similar patterns. Both had kept records. One had her own recording, and both were willing to testify. Michael's lawyer sent increasingly aggressive letters. They wanted me out of the apartment. They wanted immediate mediation. They wanted me to sign documents acknowledging that I'd had an affair with Robert. I didn't sign anything. Instead, on a Tuesday morning in late September, Carol and I walked into the Denver Police Department with a folder containing everything: the recordings, the statements from Jennifer and the other women, documentation of the financial manipulation, the Instagram photo, the text messages where Michael had threatened me. By Wednesday, Robert Chen had been arrested. By Thursday, Michael had fired his original lawyer and hired someone new. someone who understood that his father had just blown up both their lives, and that the best strategy now was to cooperate and try to minimize the damage. The detective called me that afternoon. "Your husband wants to make a deal," he said. "He's willing to testify against his father in exchange for immunity from prosecution regarding the financial manipulation of your accounts. His lawyer says he was acting under his father's direction, that Robert specifically told him how to handle the situation at the anniversary party, that Robert had been coaching him on how to maintain control over you." I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, I wasn't capable of that yet, but clarity. Michael wasn't a villain. He was a victim of his father's manipulation, just like I was. He'd been taught by Robert that this was normal, that this was how you handled women, that this was power. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. "Tell him yes," I said. "Tell him I'll agree to it." The trial of Robert Chen took place over 6 weeks in October and November. I testified, Jennifer testified, the other 2 women testified. Michael testified, his face gray and ashamed as he described his father's coaching, his father's expectations, his father's explicit instructions to make the anniversary dinner into a teaching moment for his wife. The prosecution presented the recordings. They presented the evidence of financial crimes spanning over a decade. They presented a pattern of predatory behavior that extended far beyond just his family. Robert had done this to employees, to business associates, to anyone he perceived as vulnerable. On November 15th, Robert Chen was convicted on charges of wire fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The divorce settlement came through 3 days later. Michael agreed to return the house to a joint sale. The Aspen property was liquidated and split. I got my car, my 401k, and a settlement of $450,000, money that came directly from Robert's seized assets. It wasn't enough money to erase what had happened. No amount of money could do that, but it was enough to start over. Sarah helped me find a new apartment, a small 2-bedroom in Boulder, far from the country clubs and the old money and the people who'd known me as Michael's wife. I kept my job. I started therapy. I stopped checking social media, stopped reading articles about the trial, stopped caring what people in Denver thought about me. 3 months after Robert's conviction, Michael called me. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, public space. He looked terrible, thinner, like the weight of what his father had done, what he'd participated in, had hollowed him out. "I'm sorry," he said. Those were the first words out of his mouth. "I'm so sorry, Ashley. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I understand now what happened, what my father taught me, what I did to you. And I'm getting help. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand how I could have been so cruel." I studied his face. I believed him. But belief wasn't the same as forgiveness. "I don't know how to feel about you," I said honestly. "Part of me understands that you were manipulated. Part of me will never forgive you for that night at the hotel, for throwing me out in front of 200 people, for freezing our accounts, for believing your father over your wife." "I know," Michael said. "I know, and I hate myself for it." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "I've been thinking about something. My mother. She was so thrilled to see you destroyed. Do you understand why?" I'd thought about this. Because your father had probably done the same thing to her, or to women before her, and she needed to believe that it was the victim's fault, that women like me deserved it. That way, she could stay married to him. Michael nodded. "I think so too. I think my whole family is sick, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late." After that meeting, I didn't see Michael again. He eventually moved to California, as far from Denver and his father's legacy as he could get. We communicated through lawyers to finalize the remaining details of the divorce. It was amicable in the way that broken things can be amicable. No anger anymore, just the sad recognition of what had been lost. 6 months after Robert's conviction, Jennifer called me. "I got a job offer," she said, "a consulting firm in San Francisco. They specifically sought me out because of the trial. They said they wanted someone with integrity, someone who'd stood up to corruption. They're paying me $180,000 a year. Jennifer, that's amazing, I said. I'm only telling you because I want you to know that we both survived. We both got out, and we both got to the other side of what Robert tried to do to us. I know, I said. I'm starting to understand that. Now, a year later, I'm sitting in my apartment in Boulder on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee that I made myself, in a kitchen that belongs to me. There's a man, his name is David, and he's kind, and he's nothing like Michael, and he doesn't have family money or power or secrets. We're taking things slowly, we're being honest, we're building something real instead of something that looks good on the outside. My mother called last week and asked if I was happy. I told her the truth. I'm not happy yet, but I'm healing. And healing is something. Healing is everything. I think about Michael sometimes. I think about the life I thought we had, and how it was built on lies and control, and the legacy of a man who'd learned how to destroy people and called it power. I think about how close I came to disappearing completely, not physically but as a person. How close I came to accepting that I deserved what happened to me. But I didn't disappear. I fought back. And in fighting back, I found out who I actually am. Not Michael's wife, not Robert's victim, but Ashley. Just Ashley, and that's enough. The recording of Robert's confession still sits in a police evidence file. Jennifer moved to San Francisco and started a new life. The other 2 women he'd victimized are rebuilding their lives too. And Denver's wealthiest families are finally understanding that money and power don't make you untouchable. Sometimes, the truth just takes longer to catch up. That's the thing I want you to know. If you're reading this and you're trapped in a situation that looks perfect on the outside, but feels like a cage, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting, and you're not alone. There are people who will believe you. There are lawyers who will fight for you. There is a way out, even when it feels impossible. I got my life back, and if I can do it, so can you.